Thank you for tuning in to the New Flat Rate podcast.
The New Flat Rate!
I'm so glad you're back. My name is Rosalind Zock, your guest host for part 2, the final half of the Drive for Your Life episodes. Last time, we joined technician Christopher Gibbons on the first half of his life journey. If you haven't listened to part 1, go back now to get up to speed. In this episode, Christopher walks us through the second half of his journey and tells us about how he's finally found his life purpose. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the great stories and content to come. Before we took a break, Christopher told us about the beginning of his life and how he faced several different obstacles that actually put his life in danger. Christopher, can you give us just a 30-second recap to remind us of some of those milestones?
Yeah, so I just kind of went over what happened to me and my mother in our kitchen when I was 2 years old. Crock pot blew up. I talked about multiple incidences as we were building our house, things that happened that were life critical, and then fast forwarding to joining the U.S. military, as well as going into a 6-month coma due to a motorcycle accident. That led into having a total of 42 surgeries, 5 heart stopped 5 different times, flatlined, pronounced dead on the highway, and when I woke up to getting out of the hospital, just a few days shy of my son being born.
And Christopher, up to that point, why do you think you were still alive?
I believe it was a couple different things, one of which would be my Uncle Aaron having watching over me the whole time, and my dad putting a will set inside of me that just led me to believe that never giving up would always get me further in life. And so when I woke up out of that coma, I had this immediate set that I wasn't about to give up.
And can you recap for us those lessons your dad taught you about the willpower? You told us a couple of different things that were lessons from your dad. What were those?
One was about a kite that I had that I just had tore up because I got it stuck in a tree and ripped it out of the tree. I couldn't make it fly, and I kept saying I can't to my dad. And my dad told me that the two things, if I was going to learn anything from him at all, the two things he would want me to learn the most would be to never give up and never say I can't or I won't. And what that led to believe was I can and I will. And then he kind of recanted a little bit and told me to always have a little bit of skill and a whole lot of everything. So one of those skills that I had was overcoming impossible obstacles.
Thank you. Those are definitely lessons that we can all carry forward. So at this point, do you mind sharing kind of the next chapter of your story where we go from here?
Absolutely. Following through after getting out of the hospital, it was a long recovery at that point in time. I ended up having to be in physical therapy for 16 months or so. But during the time, first couple of months being out of the hospital, it was pretty hard to be out of the hospital, all in all. One of which I still had my feeding tube in my stomach, and when it came time to getting that taken out, it was pulling a soccer ball or a softball through a pencil-sized hole. When that got done, after it was taken out, I won't go into detail as to how bad it hurt or how crazy that doctor was that pulled it out of me. A few days after it was pulled out, the tissue inside didn't heal correctly, and I was asleep, and I, in my dream, started having this really bad pain. My wife was laying beside me at the time, and she woke me up because I was screaming so bad, and I told her that it felt like something was trying to come out of my stomach, and she pulled the blanket off me. My internal sac had ripped, and I was bleeding out of my stomach, out of that hole, my feeding hole. So I was rushed to the ER, and I had to have that immediately sutured shut. So that was one of the first obstacles from a very, very quick point of being out of the hospital I had to overcome. Since the doctors didn't know if I was going to fully survive or not, they never did any facial reconstruction yet. They just kind of patched me up and left me to lay. So my left hand was balled up. It was never sewed back together. I have 3 plates that hold my right retina in place. The eye was supposed to be taken out, replaced with an artificial one, or no eye at all. My parents told the doctors that if I was going to lay there and I was going to wake up one day, they were to put my real fingers back on. They were to put my real eye back in. If I was never going to use them, that they had no idea what kind of son that they had. He would want his real ligaments in his real eye. So if I was never going to use my eye again, my parents thought it was best they just put it back in there and leave it. So that's what they did. They put a detached retina eyeball inside my skull, and they left it there. So after the stomach issue got resolved, and my face skin grafts were not done yet, the whole right side of my face was still just mangled. I had no lower eyelid. I had half of my right cheekbone or cheek skin was not there. Some of my jawline wasn't there. These were all things that were future surgeries that were going to have to be done. And so I had to wear an eye patch. And it was probably a month out of the hospital. I was walking through Walmart, and I was driving the cart, actually. My wife and my best friend was walking beside me, and I forgot my eye patch. And there was these 2 younger girls, probably 16 years old. I'll never forget her face. She was a little 5-foot brunette girl, walking on the inside of her friend towards us. When she looked up from her phone and she saw my face, she looked at me like I wasn't human, like I was Frankenstein. And she stopped and backed up and went on the other side of her friend and walked past me with her head kind of leaning away from me because I had forgot my eye patch, and she had saw something that she doesn't really see ever, which led me to put sunglasses on for the next 5 years of my life.
What did you feel in that moment? What went through your head?
Pain and anguish. At that point in time, I realized that what I didn't realize at first, I was never going to look like everybody else. I didn't feel everybody saw me as a freak and saw somebody who people just thought didn't deserve to walk among them.
You know, at this point, you've only talked about your willpower and determination. Had you considered your physical appearance before this point, or were you so determined to do all of those normal functions again that it hadn't occurred to you?
That's exactly what it was. I hadn't I hadn't really thought that I looked different. I was just so dedicated on becoming normal that I wasn't really focused on the fact that I looked completely different than everybody else, that I had a physical appearance that nobody had ever seen before. And this is when, for the next several years, it got hard after that little girl looked at me the way she did. I became very secluded. I became very angry and aggressive. I hid from everybody. I never showed the right side of my face. I wore hats or hoodies that I could put my hood up, sunglasses day and night, didn't matter when. You know, I couldn't see out of the right side of my face, so anybody who was looking at the right side of my face, I obviously had to turn towards them to see them with my left eye, and I could just tell people were just all looking at me different. My sense of awareness went up, and it just became an aggression, a really strong aggression, because I thought everybody was looking at me I knew everybody was looking at me differently at that point in time going through Walmart.
Do you feel like you lost any of your willpower at that point? Were you demotivated?
Yeah, I was. I went home and I became lazy. I wouldn't leave the house. I wouldn't leave the couch. I just jumped up from 170 pounds to 245. 245 pounds. I stopped going to therapy. I was taking my medicines and eating junk food. I was leaving everything up to my wife. She was going to work. She was supporting me. She was helping me in and out of the showers because I just didn't want to try. I didn't want anybody to see me. When it really hit me, when reality hit me that even though I was out of the hospital, I was not the same. I wanted to hide from the entire world at that point. And so it got to the point where my wife was looking for somebody to show her attention, and that she needed that compassion that I wasn't giving because I was literally the Jolly Green Giant. All I did was yell, and all I did was just be mean the whole time. And this happened for several months. I went to my doctor still and stuff like that, but as for being around people or being nice to people, it wasn't an option. I didn't feel at the time. I call it him, and that's the only thing I've ever called it was the other him, the other me. Like a split personality, somebody who came out, and the real Chris Gibbons couldn't stop him when he got angry and he got mad. It made me lose my marriage to my best friend, actually. He showed her something that I wasn't anymore. I just wasn't. I wasn't who I was before I got in my accident. I lost the military. I lost my wife. I lost my family. Even at one point, I pushed everybody away. 245 pounds, fat, lazy, not caring. The only thing that looked good to me was the end of a gun barrel. And I took that approach one point in time, very shortly after I lost my wife. And I was on a lot of narcotics, prescribed, but narcotics as it was. I was chewing on fentanyl patches and snorting Percocets and Domes, and all my 30-day prescriptions were lasting 5 days. And it was because my body was telling me I was in this pain and agony that I wasn't. I got in this depression state where nothing mattered, nobody existed, just I did, and the pain from it all. So my middle sister, she caught it. She caught the narcotic abuse, and she moved me in with her. She started becoming my everyday babysitter. She watched over me. She got rid of all of my drugs. But when she did it literally overnight. She dumped all my pills down the toilet. And she got me on a job at that point in time. This was, I was walking a little better, still 245 pounds, but got me on my feet. And I was actually working for my mom my mom's best friend at Subway. And still hadn't had my complete eye surgeries yet. It was partially patched together. But this old man came in. He was probably in his mid-60s, early 60s. And he kind of looked at me. He said, "Man," he said, "you got pretty messed up there, dude. What happened to you?" And here we go again, only with an older fella is what I thought. Only this time I had a little more willpower, and I was like, well, I was in a motorcycle accident, and this is the repercussions of being stupid on a bike. And he immediately changed his demeanor, and he was like, "Can I take you and your family out to dinner?" And I thought that was kind of weird. I said, "Okay, here's my number. whatever. So I told my mom about it. And so he took us all out to dinner and at Applebee's. And he decided, we just had a nice candid, long conversation. And then this gentleman, he stood up and lifts up his shirt and turns around. And his back, he's got these big broken angel wings on his back wrapped in wounded bandages. And he said, about 20 years ago, I was in a motorcycle accident as well. He said, only I was down and out for 8 years straight. And he said, and the same thing I'm doing for you was done to me. He goes, what you can't ever do is let life take over, because what you'll forever do, you can't let fear take over, because you'll forever live your life in fear. He goes, these broken angel wings are a representation of what put me into fear, and these broken angel wings prove that I overcame fear. And he said, I believe fully I had a guardian angel. Do you believe you had one? And it was so crazy, because that point was when I remembered my conversation with my Uncle Aaron. I remembered it fully at that point in time. It was like it just struck something in my head, and I could remember the whole conversation. So I took that to heart, and within 2 months, I went and got the broken angel wings on my leg, and it says, my guardian angel was watching over me the day my faith was tested, March 16, 2012, right on the side of my leg. I called one of my good friends, Zach Hayward. I said, hey, man, you still riding dirt bikes out there? And he said, well, I don't got dirt bikes, but I got a moped. I said, okay, come pick me up. So Zach came and picked me up one weekend. Took me out to his property in the middle of nowhere. He said, okay, buddy, if you want to do this, let's do it. So I sat down on the moped, and I fell over. And I got back on the moped, I started it, and I fell over. And I did that probably a dozen times before I could even get that thing to move an inch. After I got to move an inch, I got to move 100 feet to a mile, and I just kept riding that thing, and I finally got it to go. I was riding that thing down and back, or down his road all day long. It quickly turned from a moped into a 250 into a 600, 650, all the way back up to the Harley Fat Boy 1300. I had overcame my bike fear. So that was a big stepping stone for me. I was alone still, scared, still angry, but I was trying. So after I came over the bike fear, my sister had moved to a different location. She lived in Mishawaka, Indiana, over by up by Notre Dame. And my best friend, her name is Raina Dobro. She lived there as well. She was my best friend for 15 years, probably at this point. She was my sister's age. They grew up playing basketball together. I started hanging out with her more and more because I lived with my sister. I didn't have many friends there but my sister and Raina. And Raina, I started to realize, knew more about me than anybody I could ever imagine, even my own wife. Knew more about me. She just studied me over the last 15 years. So as we got closer and closer, because she used to be so far away, I was just right around the corner at this point in time. She was like, okay, it's time to get you back up on your feet. And what she meant by that is it was just time to start hitting the doctors on a regular. It was time to get, back in shape. So she put me in a gym. She paid for it, put me in a gym every single day. Put me on a food regimen. I was eating healthy and correctly. After about 3 months of that, weight started to shred. I started to get stronger. I started going back to physical therapy. Before I knew it, I was going to Lincoln Tech as a diesel mechanic that Raina had signed me up for. I ended up taking my credit scores and raising them up, getting a new vehicle. By almost the end of my college there, I was 178 pounds, benching 330 pounds. I was running a 9:53 2 mile. I was doing 150 pull-ups, 150 push-ups. I was just killing it. I was downright killing it, and I started to feel like I was back. But not back enough to get what was soon to be my ex-wife. It was actually, I had fallen in love with Raina, my best friend. And as everything was coming back together and my new life was coming back, I ended up getting, I guess I should recant on that, while I was going to college, I had full custody of my son, Wade. His mom was just bouncing around, and so Raina had helped me for the first 2 years of Wade's life raise him. When I told her I loved her in a whole different manner on July 4th, 2014, I loved her in a different manner than my best friend, and she told me she loved me too. We ended up conceiving with my daughter, what would have been my daughter. And on August 28th, 2014, she was taken away from me. Both of them were. And I fell back into a depression. My son went back to his mom. I bounced off the walls. I was lost. I was confused. I tasted my second barrel to a gun at that time. Her girlfriend's new boyfriend got them in an accident and killed her, and only her out of all 4 of them that was in the vehicle. So we buried them, and she was everything that I needed to be successful, and I just fell off. I started shredding weight, unhealthy. I dropped down to like 115 pounds. I was working job after job after job after job. I couldn't hold a job anywhere. I wasn't doing my career. I was joined the union, and I started traveling and just left my kid with his mom. And I got to see the country. I got to see everything. I saw so many different states, and no Wade Michael. And then finally, when I started to gain my composure and I came back home, I needed help real bad. So I started to go see a therapist, and I talked it out. There was this girl that I had knew. She had helped take care of Wade a lot when Rain and I were together. I went and found her, and ended up lusting into a relationship with her. It was nothing serious, I didn't think. But before I knew it, my lust turned into 2 children coming from this woman. And when those 2 came out, it was like a switch just flipped in my head. I knew that I had literally been making every mistake that I possibly could in life, and that's when I really started to knuckle down and finally start to think I could forgive again. I guess when Raina passed away with my daughter, I cursed God's name more than enough times to know that I didn't ever deserve his love again. And after the 2 youngest were born, I gave it a go again, and I started to get my life straight. I chose the career path that I knew I could succeed in. I went back to a full-time electrical job, and I was doing very, very well. I guess growing up, I did rodeo and I did demolition derby. I told you guys, I raced four-wheelers and motorcycles, dirt bikes, all that stuff my whole life. So becoming more of the stay-at-home dad figure, I just started doing local sports like demolition derby and going to rodeo. And that was about a year and a half after Raina passed away. I was at a big demolition derby, and it was on a pavement track. It was called the Lights Out race, and in that Lights Out race, you just got a little spotlight on top of your car. And going around the track, it was like next to the last lap. My light had went out, just turned off, and I was doing every bit of 55, 60 miles an hour in a souped-up little six-speed Civic, and I couldn't see. It was raining on the track as well. I hit a mud puddle, and it splashed up, and I couldn't see anything. The car in front of me had lost power to his car on the very last lap, and I slammed him so hard that it completely rolled him down the track, kicked me sideways, and all 11, 12, 13 cars behind me just hit me one after another, till my door was so mangled, my head was hanging out the window, and a car hit me. And it rendered me unconscious, cracked my helmet again across my face. I woke up to them completely cutting my car open. I was out for about 5 minutes before they could get me conscious. They rushed me to Goshen Hospital, and they took x-rays and MRIs in my head. They saw a bleeder in my head that was as big as a golf ball. My parents were notified. They had told them that they needed to take me somewhere, more updated hospital, somewhere with better technology, somewhere who could do this emergency surgery. When they prepped me for the drive to Parkview Regional, where it all began, they told my parents for the second time in my life that if they were going to if the lights went off on the EMS, that they just needed to pull over because I was gone. So down the highway we went at 100 and something miles an hour. My parents followed us all the way there. We ended up making it to the hospital. They rushed me into the hospital, and they took, again, refresh scans of my head, stuck me in a room for just a few minutes, and a doctor comes slamming through the doors. He looked at me and my family and in confusion, and then he walked out. And then he come busting back in. He looked at us again and then walked out. And at that point in time, my mom was so confused. She had just gotten up off her knees from crying. And she chased the doctor out of the room. Was like, "What are you doing? Like, my son needs surgery. Why aren't you guys doing surgery? You know, he's dying." And the doctor just said, "Just bear with me for a second. I'll be in just a minute." So he comes back in just a minute later, and he turns on the x-ray screen, and he puts the scans up on there, and he said, "This is your son's head an hour ago. This is your son's head now." It went from a golf ball size bleeder down to a pencil size bleeder in an hour's drive time. And we got to hear those famous doctor words again. They said this was next to impossible. They didn't have to do the surgery. It didn't cause any critical brain damage. I healed up from it. Shortly after that, I took some time off from the union. I was working for that unionized company in Fort Wayne. Just went to a small little local town job. When I went to college, I was working for Discount Tire. So I went back to a local Discount Tire on Industrial Road, and I was working for those guys. You know, they treated me like family there. It was just an easier job than being a commercial electrician. And while I was there, this is just shortly after my accident, there you have to put lift blocks under these cars when you lift them, and so there's 2-man teams. There was another guy, my teammate was on the other side, and he had already set his block, and he didn't call out that he was lifting the car, so I was still setting my blocks. And as he raised the truck up, my hand was sitting on top of that block, and he completely smashed my hand underneath on the frame of the truck. He had flattened my right hand. When he got it out, I was cursing and hollering and flipping tires and just doing all sorts of crazy stuff. They rushed me to the ER again. Took scans of my hand. Said it was too swollen to see anything, so they wrapped it all up. Said I need to come back in a few days. So a few days later, we went back and they got fresh scans of it. And again, they showed the scans from when I first came in to where it just looked like a mangled mess to that point in time where my hand was completely 100% healed, other than some what they said would look like potential scar tissue on my right hand. I guess I should pause and tell you that it was I was still with my wife at the time. I forgot about this part. It was about, I'd say, a year after I got out of the hospital. I told you guys from the beginning that my right eye was just a detached retina. It was one morning I woke up and I felt like I could see blurry vision out of my right eye. And my wife kind of laughed at me, and she was like, "No, you can't see out of the eye. It doesn't work. It's not connected." I said, No, I'm pretty positive I can see out of it. So she took me to my eye doctor, and my eye doctor put his little scan thing up against my eyes, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. My retina had reattached itself, all by itself. So this was one of another impossible things that the doctors were seeing. The retina had reattached itself, and over the next course of a few years, my vision faded back to perfect 20/20 without any LASIKs whatsoever. So I have both of my eyes. Again, my left hand, they said I would never use my fingers again because I cut through the complete ligaments. I got 4 pins in my fingers, and they move perfectly fine. So I can use those as well. And obviously, we talked about how I would never walk again. I got a 9-inch rod in my hip, 3 plates in my ankle. I walk with a 1/4-inch short leg, and that's about it. So those are things we kind of left out of the first portion of this thing.
Christopher, earlier I saw you writing and I said, "Oh, you're a lefty." Are you a lefty, or did you adapt it, or?
No, yeah, so I am left-handed. Always have been left-handed. I always shot right-handed, though, guns, and I was ambidextrous when I batted. My long-distance focus on my right eye is not good, so I couldn't shoot anymore. So, and then my shoulder, obviously, my right or left shoulder was the one that got banged up pretty bad. So I adapted shooting a crossbow or shooting a bow right-handed and shooting a gun left-handed. Completely swapped it up there. So I was able to overcome both of those. I did have to relearn how to do things with my opposite non-strong side of my body. Back to after that instance at Discount Tire, I was still derbying, never stopped doing it. Ended up still being in rodeo, got pretty hard into rodeo, and it was just a natural fit. I picked it right back up after a few bull rides. I was winning weekend after weekend, and I was riding the Jackpot Bull, which was almost a 2-ton bull, and he was big and he was worth a lot of money. But I wanted on him. I had enough points to be on top of him, so I had done what's called a butterfly death knot on my hand, and it's where you wrap your pinky up in there for extra support. I came out the gate, and it was a perfect 8-second ride, and when I went to untie I forgot my pinky was wrapped as well. I ended up getting stuck on top of him, bouncing around like like a rag doll. I hit his head, hit his back, hit his head, his back. When I finally came off him, I came back head first, no helmet, just a cowboy hat. Smacked my head straight on the ground, and when I opened my eyes, Bullfrog's legs were coming right at me. He ended up stepping on my inner thigh right into my private area and had shoved one of the two back up in me. I was pulled up by one of the rodeo guys. Again, off to the ER we went, and they said that it was potentially gone completely. I was going to have it surgically removed. My head, it had filled up one of my bleeders from the impact to the ground. One of my previous bleeders had filled back up with blood. So back to brain damage again. Plus one of my genitalias was potentially gone. 3 days later, I went back into the hospital because they said if it didn't drop out in 72 hours, they were going to have to surgically remove it. 3 days later, I went back in the hospital. It was back out, and my bleeder was completely drained on its own. All of these crucial, life-threatening events that I was having over all these years was just lust. It really was. It was just looking for more. It was looking for solitude and acceptance to the way my life was going, and it was just going nowhere fast. I was just down and out. After that ride, I laid down in my empty house, no kids, no friends, no family, and I had wrote goodbye letters to everybody. All of my kids, my parents, my friends, put my nicest suit on like you see in the movies, and I laid down on my bed. And didn't drop a bomb to anybody that I was getting ready to leave indefinitely. Out of nowhere, I hear banging on my door, and then my dad kicked my door in. My mom, she was sitting on the couch. She said that something started talking to her, telling her that she needed to come to me. And so for the second time in my life, my mom had saved my life by just being there and knowing that there was more in this life for me. They had stopped me from just ending this cycle of crashing and burning over and over again. Every time I went up, it seemed like I went down 2 more steps, and but my parents never gave up on me, ever. They just kept being there for me, and they kept knowing that there was more. I needed more. I needed something. I couldn't find it. I thought my story was to be beneficial to people. I had started getting on Facebook and posting real inspirational novel posts to people. And as I started doing that, between the rodeo and the inspiration novels, I went from one Facebook with 2,000 people to 2 Facebooks with 5,000 people apiece. People constantly filling up my inbox, just asking questions and wanting to see if I could help. And that's when I started to get a sense of hope in life, that maybe I was still around as an inspiration to people. So I started talking to as many people as I could a day, working a full-time job, messaging people full-time, answering questions, telling them how I made it, things I've been through, and so on and so forth. And there was this one specific guy who got a hold of me on Facebook. He was a U.S. soldier in Afghanistan at the time, said that he was directed my way from one of his extended friends or something. He had told me, he said, Mr. So-and-so, I know you probably get a lot of people that talk to you, but I have a serious conversation I'd like to have with you. I said, yeah, go ahead and lay it on me. So he told me about how he had been in Afghanistan. He was only supposed to be there for one tour. He was on his third consecutive. He had friends, or he had family and kids back home. His wife just all of a sudden stopped responding to him. It had been months since he had heard from his kids or his wife, and he was going to take his life. So being the guy who knows how to attempt to take your life, I had a lot of words of wisdom to give him and experiences and people being there for me. So I knew I had to help this guy. So I typed him the longest novel I could think of, and he read it and never responded. And I was confident that I was the last person that ever spoke to him. 31 days exactly, I heard my phone ding, and it was Facebook. And it was him. And I was like, oh my gosh, Mr. So-and-so, how are you? Are you doing okay? And he said, Mr. Gibbons, I just wanted to get a hold of you and tell you something. And I said, well, you're alive, so you're telling me something at least. And he goes, it gets better than that. He goes, I took your advice. And he goes, I'm going home. He said, I'm going home to my family. He's like, thank you.
How did you, as a person who had attempted to end your life a few times, and then as a person who had died a couple of times, and a person who had come close to death so many times, how did you convince him that life was worth living?
Honestly, I use almost the exact same words my dad drilled in my head my whole life. What pushed me to not give up all the times that I wanted to. I did it in more of a respectful manner than obviously, a father talking to his son. But in a sense, I told him that I took what the motorcycle guy and my dad told me, that living in fear means fear will take over your life, and that you never can say you can or you won't. You always can and you will, and there's always a better way to overcome it. You just have to look for it. And I gave him some examples of ways that he could overcome it, especially having a military background. I kind of just mangled it all together, and it was the perfect scenario for him to be able to express why he couldn't be there anymore. And it worked for him. And him taking in my advice at that point in time was when I for sure knew my bigger purpose was to be inspirational, because of that soldier who survived because of me. I knew that there was no longer an option to try to take my life. It was more to save everybody that I possibly could who would be willing to hear me. So my success point started at that point in time. That's when I knew that there was more for me than just being down on myself for what I had been through. And it was time to stop playing the games that I was, like the derbies and the rodeos and stuff like that, looking for this adrenaline to replace my depression type deal. My dad came over with a bunch of friends and a bunch of trailers, and we loaded up thousands and thousands of pounds of raw steel and derby cars, derby tires, everything. I sold everything. Once we sold that, and I was just hoarder sick to my stomach over it, I wanted to go do something great. And Hurricane Maria was right around the corner at this point, 2017. I didn't know what I could do for Hurricane Maria, but I knew I had gotten my head on track enough. I had lots of money saved up. I went out and spent a whole bunch of money on generators and water and food and all this stuff, and I was loading up my Power Stroke, and I was just going to go to Florida, and I was going to save Florida as best as I possibly could. I didn't know how. Well, I had made friends from traveling for the Union all over the country, and somebody had heard rumor down in Florida that I was on my way to do something stupid, and she goes, if you're going to do something stupid, she goes, I have a better option for you, and she introduced me to FEMA. And at that point in time, she explained to me how FEMA worked and how quickly she could have me enrolled with a government badge ID. So I went for it. I told my dad, I said, this is it. This is what I need. This is my pick-me-up. This is for me to do something good and give back, and go save some lives. And my dad said, well, if you're going to go, I'm going to go with you. So within 48 hours, we both had our government badge IDs, and within 72 hours, we were on the road for 16 hours straight, and we drove straight to Florida, right in the middle of the heart of Hurricane Maria slamming them. And for 17 days straight, we drove up and down the entire coast. We were in every single part of Florida over the next 16 days. We didn't sleep. We ran generators where we needed to run generators. We ran food where we needed to run food. And that was probably the coolest portion of my life for a success at that point in time. I knew I was destined for greater again. I got my drive back for more. So I went straight from Florida to North Carolina. My dad ended up going back home. I spent 11 days in North Carolina, and from North Carolina I went to a barge, and we loaded all of our trucks onto a barge, and I went over to Puerto Rico. I was there 24 hours after Puerto Rico got struck, and they were just in shambles. I mean, every street was destroyed, every house was out of power, and we got to work. We worked 26 hours on, 4 hours off every single day, and it was two-man teams. The trucks never stopped. Generators never stopped coming in on barges. AC-130s were flying them in. We just kept hauling them, and I literally brought life back to that island. I was going to, we would go back to the marina, and we would get cases of water, and these people who looked at us like we were hostile, within weeks we had them looking at us like we were friends, like we were family. I was handing out cases of water to some of the scariest looking people I've ever seen in this world. But the island was still in shambles, and there still was scary people on that island. We endured things over there that I signed a contract I'm not allowed to talk about, but there was one point where we were over there at 4:30 in the morning, and something happened that I had to say enough was enough over there, and it was unfortunate because I would have stayed the entire time. But at that point I came back and just went back to working for a local electrical company. I was at that local electrical company all the way up until the point where the cold was really starting to get to me. My body was just kind of done in. I needed warmer weather. So I started looking for something, and I looked for something for 6 months straight. When I found what I was looking for, it was Mr. Electric. And so I started digging into Mr. Electric. I started looking into the owner of Mr. Electric, the system that he uses, which is TNFR. I knew everything about his company when I was set and ready to go look for him. It was about 6 months after. I called some friends up. I said, hey, you want to take a trip to the Smokies? And they said, sure, why? And I said, don't ask questions, let's just go. So we spent 2 days in the Smokies, running all over Gatlinburg and doing what we needed to do. And I said, I got to take a trip over to Knoxville. And they said, okay. So I went over to Knoxville office. I was there by 7:30 a.m. because generally, businesses start between 7:30 and 8. And I was just hoping somebody would show up. And it was during, the middle of COVID. And but I didn't care. I was going to sit there and wait. And luckily, 2 workers showed up. And I got out of the car, and I said, hey, is your boss going to be here? He said, Brandon? I said, no. That Avery Pennington guy? And he said, no, I don't think he's going to be here. He's not from around here, man. I said, okay, how do I get a hold of him? He said, well, just wait till Brandon gets here. I said, Brandon will talk to you. So I talked to Brandon for about 10 minutes. I said, I told him who I was and what I was looking for. And so he called our CSR gal, Carmela. Carmela calls me just a few minutes later, said I was trying to get a hold of Avery, asking if I was trying to get a hold of Avery. And I said, yeah. Told her who I was and told her I wasn't leaving until I found Avery. And talk to him and sit down with him. I had an opportunity I wanted to present to him. She said, okay, well, I'll see if he can call you. So I sat in that parking lot, waited till Avery called me. And when he finally did call me, I told him that I had an opportunity I wanted to present to him, and I wasn't leaving until I got to. So he said, okay, well, I'm pretty busy, blah, blah. I said, that's fine. I'm not leaving until you can meet me. You could hear the sense of smile in his voice. And he said, okay, Mr. Gibbons, when? I said, how about Sunday morning? Let's have breakfast. So he took me out to a Cracker Barrel that morning, Sunday morning. And I presented very subtly an opportunity to him. I told him, I was very subtle. I wasn't arrogant about it. But I told him that I had a lot to bring to the table, and I set my bar high for him. He asked me how much money I wanted to make in a year's time. I said, over 100K. He said, in your first year? I said, I want to make 100K in the first year. He said, well, theoretically it is possible. And he goes, but you'd have to work pretty hard at it. I said, so I told Avery that I set standards for myself with Avery, and I told him 2 weeks. All I needed was 2 weeks to prove to him, and I would supersede his expectations, or he could just fire me and I'd move on. So he took me up on my offer, and he shook my hand, and that was in July of 2020. So the end of September rolled around, and I told Avery I was set and ready and in stone, ready to go. I ended up showing up and started on October 1st with Avery of 2020. He generally has a 2-week training period, but by October 5th, they had released me on my own, and by the end of the following week, I had made over $25,000 for Avery.
So can I back up and ask, you were researching about Avery, you had found out about Mr. Electric, you had found out about the system he uses, the new flat rate, but what about Avery versus everyone in the country made you seek him out and made you know that you had to be there working for him?
He was a risk taker. So when I looked into Mr. Electric, I saw their gold standards. And as I looked into Avery specifically and his Mr. Electric franchise, he walks outside the boundaries because he knew it was right. And backing up through my whole past 8 years, I was a risk taker. And every risk that I took, it taught me a lesson. I failed from it. I grew from it. I became stronger and more knowledgeable. And because I could tell Avery was a risk taker because he specifically was walking with TNFR, which was outside the boundaries of Mr. Electric, but it was working for him. And that's why I knew it had to be Avery, because he was exactly what I needed to bring what I had to offer to the table. I'm great in sales. I love people. I am very statistically bound. I analyze and not overanalyze. I could tell that I would fit and be suitable to Avery because Avery didn't know me from Adam. I was bringing something incredibly crazy to the table from super far away. The dude didn't have to trust me for nothing, but I knew that if there was going to be a company business owner that would be willing to take a risk on me, it would be Avery, because he is willing to step outside the boundaries for success, and that's what I needed. I needed somebody who wasn't quite willing to just walk the straight and narrow and think it was going to work, but somebody who was willing to take a risk because they knew it was going to work.
And tell me about the new flat rate. What was appealing about that? What drew you in there?
What was appealing about the new flat rate, and I was just all smiles the first time I was in with Matt Coop, was when he very first talked about giving options to customers, that the words I believe he used was making them own it. That stuck to me because back home, being, the side scout that I was with my own little small personal business, I didn't just stick to a price and make the customer take that price. I enjoyed the fact that Matt wanted to give customers the option to choose what they wanted. I enjoyed the fact that when you approach a customer with TNFR, you're being thorough with them, but yet you're not sticking them in a position where they feel like they have to go with you because they don't have an option. The fact that Matt's TNFR was being presented in a way that customers felt comfortable, and it makes you, to the customer, feel like you're more family than just a technician in their home. So when I watched the videos before I ever even got to be with Matt Coop or Avery, just a little bit of stuff that I saw you guys had posted online, listening to him talk, I literally could see myself talking through Matt. Like, he spoke exactly how I have always presented myself to people and customers and relations. I could tell that I could mimic Matt Coop, just not be Matt Coop. I'm a little taller than him, so, but in all seriousness, between the two combining, it was everything I hoped and dreamed. I love being an electrician with more than a passion, and Matt Coop made it 100% possible to be this amazing salesperson and a technician at the same time. Be passionate about my job, but yet be like family every time I walk inside of a home.
And so do you feel like, now I'm just digging more into the new flat rate, do you feel like you have to be a salesperson to use the new flat rate?
No, I don't. Not by any means at all. Matt Coop, I've been straightforward and honest with him that I don't follow your guys' detailed script. That's, I feel, is for the basics of getting started. But as you advance and get more knowledgeable, using the flat rate to better your skills in your own terminology and language is it's so open. Like, TNFR has this wide variety of ways you can use it. You don't have to follow the script to be a good salesman. You can be yourself, but still integrate the things that you guys are teaching to make yourself perfected, to walk that line. Like, I take pieces of what Matt has spoke about how you should talk to a customer, and I integrate it in my own Chris Gibbons. Like, I have this 9-iron joke, when I go in there to break the ice. When the customers start to hear the pricing, I'm like, now listen, if you got any 9-irons, you need to go ahead and leave them in the closet because I don't want chased out of the house again. That comes from Matt Coop when he told me that a guy dang near picked him up from his throat and pinned him against the wall. So I broke that ice because Matt Coop taught me to be ready for that. And even though I didn't approach it the way, Matt had taught it, his voice and his structure to the process was still there. And because of his process and his structure and his framing, it has formatted something incredible with me. You guys have a blueprint for us to follow, but it doesn't mean that we have to build it exactly how you guys have had it.
Now at this point I can stop tooting the new flat rates horn a little bit. Tell me about your life now. What does it look like? Where are you? What has changed now that you're with Avery at Mr. Electric, now that you're using the new flat rate, now that you're on the other side of all of these tragic events? What does your life look like?
I didn't really know at first that Mr. Electric monitors all their sales technicians from the beginning. Using TNFR, being with Avery, I have been independently known as Mr. Electric Chris Gibbons. I am known all over Knoxville region. My Google reviews are 5 stars across the boards. me and my girlfriend, we get called Mr. and Mrs. Electric throughout Knoxville. You cannot say Chris Gibbons. It has to be Chris Gibbons, Mr. Electric, and people know who you are. We just recently started doing advertisement here, but for the past 8 months, it's been nothing but word of mouth. Chris Gibbons, word of mouth, Mr. Electric, Chris Gibbons, and that was a great feeling. I mean, I have 8, 9, 10 plaques hanging on my walls, being the lead sales technician across the entire country. I have made friends and people who say I am welcome at their home, both a technician and a friend. I have gained so much being here, working with TNFR and working with Avery in the system, that not only have I got to integrate my story from time to time to customers, I've got to be where I can feel I belong. The customer basis is just incredible. It's out of this world. I couldn't honestly change it. My success story here in the past 10 months has been bigger than I could have ever imagined it to be. To be known across an entire city is incredible, and to be known as a successful technician and a well-maintained professional salesperson, that is mind-blowing to me. I've shedded a million happy tears over it. My mom's waiting for my billboard to pop up somewhere with my face on it. My parents over the past 9 years have had a rough time saying I'm proud of you, which was solely based on obviously the way my past 9 years have went. In the past 9 months, I have heard my parents say I'm proud of you more times than I could ever imagine. My parents have wrote their final receipt to me because I paid them back all of the money that they have lent me. My mom finally wrote me my final receipt in June, May or June of this year, so they're fully paid off. We have been able to financially do things that I've always wanted to do, and it is all strictly because I took a risk, and I came and found Avery. Avery took a risk on me and gave me the opportunity, and Matt Coop saw something in me that I didn't quite just see yet, and he laid it on me hard and thick. And when he took that ride along, we had some very personal conversation about it. He got to see me fail twice with 2 different appointments, and those 2 appointments, I'm so happy I failed at them, because Matt Coop gave me the biggest pointers that I have yet to fail on again. I feel like being with Avery, I've created a huge family that can't do anything but literally just keep going up from here.
That's amazing. So I'm thinking back, towards the beginning of your story to now. I'm thinking about that girl in the store who looked at you and broke your heart and made you wear sunglasses for 5 years, and now, I mean, you're glowing with this happiness, and you can feel this energy coming out of you. Did you ever imagine that you would feel happiness again after that moment, and how that evolved? Tell me about that.
No, from the time that girl looked at me to now, there would have never been a guess in my life that I would ever feel like this again. I always thought I was going to be dark and soulless and just a nobody. I never thought that success was going to be in my life again. I never thought that I could ever become or amount to anything. And I sure as heck never thought anybody, this whole country just looks right past my scars like I'm human. And, I knocked out my front 6 teeth, and I had six artificial implants. One of them got broke out. I had a flipper for a while, an artificial tooth, and I just got tired of losing it and replacing it. And when the sunglasses came off, I never went and bought another tooth. I never went and got another implant, because that was one more fear I had to overcome. So one front missing tooth because it got knocked out again, the scars on my face, no sunglasses. I've overcame all of that, and people don't look at me any differently because I finally figured out that it's not about how you look, it's about who you are as a person.
Yeah. So earlier I had asked you, why are you alive, at the end of our first chapter. So now I ask you again, in this chapter, why are you alive?
Because I was destined for greater. I was put here specifically to show people that there is never a time to give up, that if there is always going to be fear in your life, then you will forever have these bad thoughts about giving up. But if you can overcome the fearful things that make you feel that way, success will rise. And if you give it to a higher power, whoever or whatever that may be, and just stop worrying about what people think, success follows. I have given up on trying to impress people. I have given up on trying to be artificial. I have given up on trying to mask my true identity, and everybody and everything, every aspect of my life has changed. People look at me the same. My life has excelled. Things have just grown more naturally, because when I thought I was at my lowest, when I knew I was at my lowest, I finally just gave up and kept pushing forward and not reaching anymore. I started looking. Instead of reaching, I started looking, and I found what was successful, and I went with it, and I didn't give up on it, and I couldn't be happier. I know I'm placed here to show everybody that giving up is not an option.
And so what does success mean to you?
Success means to me, it's not money. Success is having people look at me like I'm changing lives for the better. And every single time I change somebody's house or I wire it and they say thank you, I feel safer. That's success to me. When I can change one person's life, whether big or small, that's success to me. Money is a materialistic thing, it really is, but other people smiling at the end of the day with Chris Gibbons, that's success. You know, if I have people telling me that it was a fantastic day to be with me, and they were more than happy to have me in their house. I've had customers say, I treat you as family, come by whenever. That's success to me. When people, such as my boss, higher ups, tell me good job and I don't gloat about it, I just know that he is proud of me, like a father figure, that's success to me. Success is not a materialistic thing that you can earn and go spend. Materialistic is just a formality of a weak point in your life. But success is when you can pick somebody back up, or you can make somebody feel safe or happy. That's success to me.
Well, Christopher, is there anything else that you would like to leave us with?
Yeah. If there was ever an option to do it over again, the one thing I wouldn't do is go against my gut. I went against my gut feeling more than enough times to know that second guessing yourself will only get you further behind. But if you have a gut feeling, don't let anybody step in the way of that. Surround yourself with positive people, successful people, people that want more out of life. And I found this at such a late start. But if you surround yourself with successful people, positive people, people who want more out of life, people who will pick you up and not put you down, the friends that want to take you to the bar are not the friends who are successful. The guys who want to tell you, yeah, man, go for it, you got this, those are the successful people. And if I could do it all over again, I heard those people at a very young age. I would have followed their footsteps. I would have went down their path, because that's where it's at. successful people, people with drive, people with motion, people who want more out of life instead of just settling, those are the people to be with. Those are the people who can make you be more successful. I'm 29 years young. I run an entire eastern corner, and never in a million years would I think I'm making six figures running an entire eastern corner for a franchisable company. I did it because I gave up on the beer budget friends, and I started believing that the successful people was going to take me where I wanted to go.
Well, Christopher, thank you for your courage and your vulnerability. I know that this is the first time you've really shared your entire story out loud for everybody to hear, so thank you for sharing. And you are changing lives with this story. Somebody's life is being touched right now, and so I want you to know that this is changing lives, that you may have just saved somebody's life today again by sharing. So thank you for that courage, and I know that you're going to continue to change more lives as you go.
Thank you.
Christopher's story is so inspirational, and we want to thank him again for his vulnerability and for choosing to share it with us first. It has truly been an honor. If you would like to learn more about the new flat rate and how menu pricing can change your life, go to thenewflatrate.com or email info@menupricing.com. We can't wait to hear from you. Until then, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast channel so you can always get the latest and greatest.